Look, basically, my name's Estelle Marshall, and I'm doing a presentation today on HSP. So I'm going to share my screen. So slideshow from beginning. There we go, and it's working this time. So HSP, what is it? So HSP stands for a few different things, but in this case, we're looking at hereditary spastic paraplegia, which is a group of genetic progressive neurological conditions. It's very rare, and when we say rare, it's less than 5 per 100,000 people. So there's not a lot of us in the UK. So there's quite a number of different genes that have been identified because, like I said, it's a group of genetic conditions. So it's not created by one gene. And because it's a variety of conditions, it's quite different. Everybody's very individualized. Some types start in childhood and others start in adulthood. Usually it has no effect on life expectancy. So unlike MND, whereby people tend to, where very much limits life expectancy. So HSP is divided into pure and complex. So the pure has lower limb weakness, symptoms, involuntary spasms, cramps, spasticity, so increased tone, urinary problems, loss of sensation in feet sometimes, fatigue, pain, and digestive and bowel problems. Whereas complicated hereditary spastic paraplegia includes all them symptoms of the pure and includes other symptoms as well. So what is ataxia? So ataxia, I'm going to move this so that you can see clearly. So ataxia is the symptom of complex HSP. So it's not found in everybody that has HSP. But it's where you're trying to move and your coordination is impacted. So you get jerky movements instead of smooth movements. So as a muscle relaxes or contracts, it should do it in a smooth, controlled way. Whereas with ataxia, it doesn't. There's a jerk and uncoordination. Okay. So neuropathy. So neuropathy is an altered sensation. So typically we think of neuropathy as being a lack of sensation, but neuropathy can also include pain, numbness, and weakness and tingling the feet. So I've experienced where my feet felt so cold they were painful, even though actually when I touched them, they weren't that cold. But it's an altered sensation to stimuli. Okay, fatigue. Fatigue, neurological fatigue is very different to being tired. It's an overwhelming feeling of tiredness and exhaustion. With neurological fatigue, tasks that are normally easy can become really difficult. So it feels really challenging just to carry on. Just even trying to sit up can feel really difficult. If fatigue hits when you're out and you know you've got to get back home, trying to get back, it just feels such hard work. It also can impact how you process information, how your memory and paying attention and making decisions, and therefore can impact your ability to function. So spasticity. So hereditary spasticity, it's one of the key symptoms of it. And spasticity is stiffness. It's when muscles are switching on, but they're not switching off. So you're getting messages to tell your muscles to contract, but not telling them to actually switch back off. When you're walking, you're trying to use your quads and your hamstrings are fighting against them, and vice versa. So when your hamstrings are trying to work, your quads are still working. So your muscles are always fighting against each other, and therefore the work of walking is much harder. So it has been described as trying to walk with your trousers full, like with a pair of baggy trousers full of potatoes. So as you're walking, the potatoes are pushing against you. So within spasticity, there's people experience spasms, and that's when there's an involuntary muscle contraction which occurs, which can be very uncomfortable and last for a short space of time or longer. And also with spasticity, there's clonus, which is that rhythmic bouncing movement, particularly in the legs where it just kicks off. And that's a key factor to spasticity. So like I was saying before, it can impact people at varying different ages. So this little boy is a lovely little lad who's got SPG7 and his mum's really lovely. And even though he's never walked and has some learning difficulties and special needs, he's a very happy little chappy. So with HSP, there's massive symptom overlap and frequently people are misdiagnosed. And these are four of the conditions that people tend to be misdiagnosed with, as well as being told that it's all in their head and that, you know, there's nothing wrong with them. Because actually right at the beginning, when the gait abnormality develops, it's point blank obvious that there's something wrong. Nobody can watch me walk and think that there's not something wrong. But right at the beginning, symptoms aren't always clear, and somebody knows that their body's not responding like it should, but they're not always taken seriously, or get misdiagnosed with other conditions. So MS is also a progressive neurological condition whereby messages don't get from brain along the spinal cord, and that's because of the myelin sheath around the nerve cells breaking down. So it has huge overlap of symptoms, and both typically tend to start with things like tripping over your own feet. I know quite a few people with MS who've got back pain, and it's very, very similar symptoms. Motor neuron disease is in the same family as HSP. Now, there are different forms of motor neuron disease, some faster than others. It has an impact on life expectancy, but the symptoms are very, very similar. Even as far as with the complex form of HSP impacting the speech and swallow, but not to the same degree that it does in MND. So cerebral palsy, of course, being brain damage before or after birth. So children who start with the HSP at very young age tend to be misdiagnosed as having cerebral palsy. Although nowadays, brain MRI should confirm one way or the other. So Parkinson's disease. So some of the symptoms of Parkinsonian traits, are experienced by people, particularly with complex forms of HSP, such as initiating movement, turning, even postural changes. So there are some real overlaps to symptoms. So I know of people with HSP who were misdiagnosed as having Parkinson's previously. So here's an upper motor neuron, and we're using almost the entire screen. So you can see that within the complex and within the pure, different parts of the nerve cell are impacted. Now, myself, I've got SPG7, which impacts the mitochondria within the nerve cell, which is what's called the powerhouse of the nerve cell, which gives the nerve cell the energy. So basically, nerve cells don't have the energy and therefore die. Okay, so modes of inheritance, because like I said, HSP is a family of conditions with a number of different genes. So there's different ways that those genes work. So it's not that that HSP is a dominant gene. There are dominant recessive genes, X-linked mutations, and mitochondrial inheritance. But even given that it's a genetic condition, only 16% of people within my study who, when they were diagnosed with HSP, had ever heard of it. So it's still not known about. That can partly be the case because family members may have been misdiagnosed, or like in my own case, the SPG7 is a recessive gene, which means basically, we can see it here, both my parents are carriers of the gene and I'm the affected child. Okay, whereas, so even with two parents being carriers, so that they were completely unaware that they were carriers because their parents were carriers and their grandparents were carriers, and so it went on like that. So there was no family history. Whereas with dominant genes, there's a 50% chance of a child being born from an affected parent. And with the dominant gene, they only need to get one of the genes. So either from the mother or father, for it to become affected. Whereas with recessive, they need to actually have both of the faults for it to kick in, whereas one fault on its own just means that they become carriers, like their parents. So then we're looking a little bit at spasticity versus rigidity. So basically with spasticity, it's velocity dependent. So it depends on how quick you move. So the faster the movement, the more resistance you get. And that's caused because of the nerve damage. Whereas rigidity is just a generalized tone, increase in tone. So it's the same right the way through the movement, feeling that the same resistance all the way through. Okay. So here we've just got examples. So dependent on where the spasticity, what muscles it impacts, tends to be which direction it'll affect. So for most people with HSP, it's the calf muscles that tend to suffer with a lot of spasticity, hence the tripping, because you end up with a loss of dorsiflexion with the ankle. So catching on your toes, because that calf muscle is not switching off when it should. Okay, so now just a little bit about gait analysis. So when you're doing, so gait analysis is a very useful tool. It gives us insight into what's working and what's not working. Okay, so when you're doing gait analysis, the looking at starting at the feet and working your way up, or starting at the head and working your way down, doesn't really matter, but it's looking at what position the different joints are, how fast somebody's walking, what their center of gravity is, what their stride length is. Okay? Because with reduced range of movements in the hamstrings, it causes a reduced stride length. What's the center of gravity like? What's their base of support? Are they steady? You know, are they at risk of falls? There's a lot you can learn from somebody's gait. And also, then you can go, well, your main problem when you're walking is that you're not getting foot clearance. So we really need to work at, and where is that problem caused? Is that at the ankle? You know, if it is at the ankle, what can be done about it? So it's using it as a tool. So now I've just got a few examples of HSP gait. Okay, let's move that up to that. So this is a young lad called Arthur. And I'd muted the volume and then unmuted it. So this is the first video in 2011. And his mum looked and thought, there's something wrong, you know. So he was just told that he has tightness in his Achilles tendon and was given some stretchers, but not actually diagnosed with anything. We'll watch that one more time. And then we've got so you can see a zigzagging, a crossing over, where his adductors are quite tight, so it's pulling the leg in front. There's a drop, an ipsilateral drop at the right hip can be seen. He is quite steady though, and he's got quite a reasonable speed, but very much an abnormal gait pattern. And this young lad was basically, they were told that there was nothing really wrong, and there clearly is something wrong. So, and here he is, a few years later, after doing considerable amount of stretching. And we can actually see that, yes, he's no longer so much on his toes, but the gait has deteriorated. He's slowed down. There's a problem with the right knee, we can see as that's going. Managed quite well on uneven surfaces. So again, he's still quite steady. He's not always getting enough dorsiflexions. There is some weakness there in the dorsiflexors. So he was diagnosed with HSP. There we go. So this young lady lives in Bangkok, she's 44 years old. So when I say young, I'm stretching the realms of it slightly. And she lives in Bangkok in Thailand. So you can see that the knees clicking back. And you can also see how difficult she has a turn in. So there's some more. Let's do this one. So there's some videos outside. So she's not getting very good dorsiflexion. I would say I don't think her footwear's the best, but given the hot climate. Okay. So you can see difficulty in turning, difficulty initiating movements. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Molly suits. Now they are self-purchase items, and they are quite expensive. So they were invented in Sweden. As you can tell, I've got mine on at the moment. So although they're expensive, I decided after an assessment that it was worth the money, and I stand by that. So this is the Molly suit. Basically, they've got 56 electrodes stitched into them. So I can actually show you there. So basically it can be washed, and then you attach the power pack to it. It's used for other neurological conditions as well. And here you can see what they do when you go. They do an assessment because they're not actually interested in flogging them to people that they're not going to help, which I think is really good. So these are before and after. So they do videos before, and then you wear this Molly suit for an hour. Now this is obviously myself before Christmas. Now this video did trigger me to actually lose some weight, which I'm not quite as fat as I was then. But if we watch again, and you can see the right arm is raised and in an abnormal position. Now, there's nothing specifically wrong with my arm. That's an associated reaction, and that's simply because walking such hard work that you tighten other parts of your body become rigid. Okay, but as we're watching that, you can see that there's just a bit of improvement in the second one. There's still very much a hip swing in that because of the lack of dorsiflexion, swinging the hip round instead as to prevent me tripping. So the sit to stand could really see quite a difference in that it was much easier to initiate that movement. But what it feels like after you've worn it is that when you tell your body to move, it moves. And that's actually quite a different feeling, because when you're accustomed to your body not doing as it's told, it's great. So this is the step up one, and we can see the real concentration on my face on the first one, trying to get the legs to do as they're told, and whereas in the second one, they're actually just moving. With the molly suit, it is much better when somebody has a molly suit for them wearing it regularly, but also participating in doing stretches and doing other activities. Right? The next one, sit to stand. So there's an increase in the smoothness of the movement. It can just be seen. And it's just much easier movement. There's less momentum had to be gained before. Okay. So we're going to leave it at that. Stop sharing, because basically I'm doing another talk on a study that I've done as well. So if you're interested in that, that's something to watch as well. And I hope this has been of use to you. All right.